My name is Colleen, and I'm 56 years old, a retired nurse from Boston. Right now, I'm lying in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency heart surgery 3 days ago. My son Adrian just called with news that knocked the wind out of me. "Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow, and I've sold your car and house. Bye," I responded calmly. "Okay, but you left out one thing." He asked, "What do you mean?" I laughed out loud, because the house isn't actually his to sell. If you're watching this from your hospital bed too, give this video a like and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal and unexpected comebacks. I never imagined my only child would betray me like this. For 28 years, it was just Adrian and me against the world after his father Mark walked out when Adrian was only 3. Mark claimed he wasn't ready for fatherhood and disappeared to start a new family in California. We never received a single child support check. Those early years were incredibly tough. I worked double shifts at Boston General Hospital as a registered nurse, often leaving before dawn and returning well after Adrian was asleep. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, would watch him after school until I could afford proper childcare. I still remember the guilt I felt missing his first-grade play because I couldn't get the night off. Despite the financial struggles, Adrian never went without necessities. I budgeted carefully clipped coupons and worked holiday shifts for extra pay. Christmas mornings were modest compared to his friends, but I made sure he always had at least one special gift under our small artificial tree. When he was 8, I saved for 6 months to buy him the bicycle he wanted. The joy on his face that Christmas morning made every sacrifice worthwhile. 20 years ago, after years of saving, I finally purchased our small 3-bedroom house in Dorchester. It wasn't in the fanciest neighborhood, but it had a tiny backyard where Adrian could play and a kitchen with enough counter space for baking cookies together on weekends. The day we moved in, Adrian helped carry boxes, despite being only 8 years old. "This is our forever home, right, Mom?" he asked, and I promised him it was. During his elementary and middle school years, Adrian and I were inseparable. I arranged my shifts to attend every baseball game, cheering loudly as he pitched. We worked on science projects together at the kitchen table, stayed up late, reading adventure stories, and spent Sundays exploring Boston's parks. He was a kind, thoughtful boy who brought me dandelion bouquets and made handmade birthday cards that I still keep in a special box in my closet. The changes began during high school. Adrian started comparing our modest home to his friends' larger houses in better neighborhoods. The gratitude I'd instilled seemed to fade as he became increasingly image-conscious. For his 16th birthday, he was devastated when I presented him with a reliable used Honda instead of the new sports car he wanted. "Everyone will think we're poor," he complained, the words stinging more than he knew. Despite these concerning shifts, I remained determined to give Adrian opportunities I never had. When his SAT scores qualified him for several good colleges, I encouraged him to accept Boston University's offer. Despite the financial strain, their partial scholarship still left us. I remortgaged the house, took on weekend home care jobs, and dipped into my modest retirement savings. "It's an investment in your future," I told him, truly believing every penny was well spent. During his sophomore year, Adrian met Natalie, a marketing major from Greenwich, Connecticut. From our first meeting, I sensed her disapproval. She barely touched the homemade meal I'd spent hours preparing and made thinly veiled comments about the quaint size of our home. Adrian seemed oblivious to her condescension, laughing uncomfortably when she suggested he must be so motivated to succeed, coming from such humble beginnings. After graduation, Adrian landed an entry-level position at a financial services firm where Natalie's father had connections. Suddenly, my son, who once proudly wore thrift store clothes, was obsessed with designer brands and luxury apartments. Our Sunday dinners became monthly, then quarterly events. When he did visit, he spent most of the time on his phone or criticizing my outdated furniture and inefficient career choices. The first birthday he completely forgot was my 50th. I sat alone with a small cake I'd baked, waiting for his call until midnight. When I mentioned it a week later, he seemed annoyed, claiming he was swamped with important client meetings. The following Christmas, he arrived 2 hours late, stayed for only 45 minutes, and gave me a generic gift card with the price sticker still attached. 3 months ago, I received my heart disease diagnosis. Years of stress, irregular sleep during night shifts, and putting everyone else's needs before my own had finally caught up with me. My doctor recommended immediate lifestyle changes and medication, warning that my condition was serious. When I called Adrian, he seemed distracted and promised to visit the following weekend, but never showed up. As I lay in this hospital bed, tubes monitoring my damaged heart, I realize how blind I've been. The signs were there all along, but a mother's love often sees what it wants to see. I never imagined that the little boy who once promised to take care of me when I got old would be the one to cause me the most pain. The first real warning sign appeared about 6 months ago. I was reviewing my bank statement when I noticed several unfamiliar withdrawals. When I called the bank, they confirmed someone had accessed my account online multiple times. The IP address matched Adrian's home internet provider. When confronted, he claimed he was just checking to make sure I was managing my money properly. "Mom, you're getting older. I worry about your financial decisions," he said, though I'd always been extremely careful with money. 2 weeks later, I discovered my investment account password had been changed. When I called the company, they explained that my son and financial advisor had requested the update. I was stunned, since I'd never authorized Adrian to access these accounts. When I confronted him, he became defensive. "You should be grateful I'm looking out for your interests. Dad left you with nothing. Remember, I'm just making sure history doesn't repeat itself." His words hurt, but I tried to understand his perspective. Perhaps he was genuinely concerned about my welfare. Still, something felt wrong. I changed all my passwords and requested notification of any account changes. My best friend Judy has never trusted Adrian's relationship with Natalie. "That girl sees dollar signs when she looks at you," Judy warned during our weekly coffee date. "And she's filling Adrian's head with nonsense about what he deserves." I defended him, insisting he was just ambitious, but Judy wasn't convinced. "Watch your accounts, Colleen. Family or not, protect yourself." Last month, I invited Adrian and Natalie for Sunday dinner, hoping to reconnect. They arrived late, barely touched my pot roast, and spent most of the meal whispering to each other. While clearing dishes, I overheard a troubling conversation from the kitchen. "We need to handle her finances before the wedding," Natalie said. "My father won't help with the down payment if we don't get this sorted." Adrian replied, "Don't worry, she'll sign the papers. She always gives me what I want." I pretended not to hear, but my hands shook as I loaded the dishwasher. What papers? What were they planning? That night I couldn't sleep, replaying their conversation and connecting it to Adrian's unusual interest in my finances. The pressure began subtly. Adrian started calling more frequently, always steering conversations toward my retirement plans. He suggested selling my too-large house and moving to a senior apartment complex. "You don't need all this space, Mom. It's a waste of money and energy maintaining it." I reminded him that I loved my home, my garden, and my neighbors. This house represented decades of hard work and independence. Besides, I was only 56, hardly ready for a retirement facility. His frustration grew with each refusal. "You're being stubborn and irrational," he snapped during one heated discussion. "This neighborhood is declining. Property values are peaking now. It makes financial sense to sell." 2 weeks ago, I noticed my home office had been disturbed after Adrian's brief visit. Several folders were misplaced, and my filing cabinet drawer wasn't fully closed. Upon checking, I discovered missing documents, my house deed insurance policies, and the folder containing my will and power of attorney forms that I'd never actually signed. The missing documents confirmed my growing fears. Adrian wasn't concerned about my welfare. He was planning something that required my assets. The son I'd sacrificed everything for was plotting behind my back. Frightened but determined, I contacted Thomas Jenkins, an attorney specializing in elder law. Though I hated thinking of myself as needing elder protection, especially from my own son Thomas, helped me understand the legal vulnerabilities in my situation. 3 days ago, while gardening in my backyard, I felt a crushing pain in my chest. The world spun as I collapsed among my beloved rose bushes. My neighbor found me and called 911. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was thinking about Adrian and wondering if he'd even care that his mother was dying. I'll never forget the details of that hospital room. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside me, the antiseptic smell that couldn't quite mask the lingering scent of cafeteria food, the scratchy feel of the thin blanket against my skin, the afternoon sunlight filtering through half-closed blinds, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Nurse Gabrielle had just finished checking my vitals recording numbers on her tablet with efficient taps. "Your blood pressure's still higher than we'd like, Colleen," she said kindly. "Try to rest and avoid stress." If only she knew what was coming. My phone rang at 6:47 p.m. Adrian's name flashed on the screen. Despite everything, my heart lifted. Perhaps he'd heard about my surgery and was calling with concern. Maybe he was even on his way to visit. Hope that stubborn emotion refused to die completely. "Adrian, honey," I answered, my voice still raspy from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "Mom." His tone was brisk, businesslike. No inquiry about my health, no warmth. Just a statement as if confirming I was indeed on the line. In the background, I heard Natalie's distinctive laugh and the clink of glasses. They were celebrating something. "I have some news," he continued without preamble. "Natalie and I are getting married tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I gasped. "But I thought you were planning for next spring. Why the rush? And why didn't you tell me sooner?" "It's better this way, just a small ceremony at the courthouse. Natalie's parents will be there. No need for a big production." No need for his mother, he meant. The pain of this exclusion was physical, a stabbing sensation joining the surgical discomfort in my chest. "I also wanted to let you know that I've taken care of selling your house and car." He continued, his voice eerily calm, as if discussing the weather rather than dismantling my life. "The market's hot right now, and we got excellent offers on both. The house closes next week." My vision blurred. The heart monitor beside me began beeping faster. "You what, Adrian? You can't sell my house. You don't have the authority." "Actually, I do," he interrupted. "Remember those papers you signed last month? They included a power of attorney. It's all perfectly legal." But I hadn't signed anything. Had he forged my signature? The thought made me physically ill. "This is for your own good, Mom." He continued, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd grown to dread. "You can't live alone anymore, not with your health issues. We've arranged for you to move into Sunny Pines Assisted Living. They have an opening next month." Sunny Pines. The facility I'd specifically told him I never wanted to enter. The place where my own mother had spent her final miserable months. My heart raced dangerously fast, but somehow I maintained a calm voice. "I see. And what about my things, my furniture, my photos, my garden?" "We'll put essential items in storage. The rest will be sold or donated. You won't need much in your new apartment. It's all handled." His tone suggested I should be grateful for this upheaval, this theft of my autonomy. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. The manipulation was so blatant, so complete, that it somehow broke its power over me. I saw with perfect clarity who my son had become, and I remembered what he didn't know. "Okay, Adrian," I said quietly, "but you left out one thing." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" Irritation colored his voice now. I laughed then, a genuine laugh that probably sounded slightly unhinged given the circumstances. The nurse glanced over with concern. "Nothing," I said. "Congratulations on your wedding. Goodbye, Adrian." I hung up before he could respond. The phone immediately rang again, but I silenced it and placed it on the bedside table. Nurse Gabrielle approached, frowning at the elevated numbers on my monitor. "Everything okay, Colleen?" she asked, adjusting my IV line. "No," I answered honestly, "but it will be." The nurse Jennifer, according to her name tag, looked at me with genuine concern that my own son had failed to show. Is there someone I can call for you? Family, a friend. In that sterile hospital room faced with the greatest betrayal of my life, I made a decision. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Please call Judy Thompson from my contacts, and then I need to speak with my lawyer. The hours after Adrian's call were the darkest of my life. The monitors tracked my racing heart as I tried to process the magnitude of his betrayal. Nurse Jennifer brought me water and a mild sedative, which I refused. I needed a clear head to fight what was coming. When Judy arrived 40 minutes later, her face registered shock at my condition. The tubes, the monitors, my pallor. But it was the despair in my eyes that broke her composure. "Oh, Colleen," she whispered, taking my hand in hers. "What happened?" Through tears, I explained Adrian's call. Judy's expression shifted from concern to fury as I recounted his claims about selling my house and car. "That ungrateful little—" She stopped herself, squeezing my hand instead. "But how could he sell your property without your consent? He claims I signed a power of attorney," I explained. "But I never did. Thomas and I discussed one, but I never signed it." Judy's face darkened. "Colleen, I saw Adrian and Natalie at Boston Trust Realty yesterday. They were with James Peterson, that flashy realtor who handles luxury listings. I thought maybe they were buying a place, but now—" My stomach dropped. "He's really doing it. He's selling my home." Judy pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my nephew at First National. He can check if any transactions have gone through your accounts." 20 minutes later, we had confirmation of my worst fears. Adrian had emptied my primary savings account that morning. Nearly $42,000 transferred to an account in his name. The money I'd set aside for potential cardiac rehabilitation, gone. The revelation triggered an alarm on my heart monitor. My blood pressure spiked dangerously, and 2 nurses rushed in. I heard phrases like "risk of another event" and "keep her stable" as they administered medication through my IV. The room spun, and I felt myself slipping away from consciousness. That night was the lowest point of my life. Worse than when Mark abandoned us. Worse than when I worked through pneumonia because we needed the money. Worse than receiving my heart diagnosis. As I drifted between medication-induced sleep and painful wakefulness, I questioned every parenting decision I'd ever made. Where had I gone wrong with Adrian? Was this punishment for the school events I'd missed, for not providing the luxuries other parents gave their children? Had I raised a son who saw his mother as nothing more than a resource to be drained and discarded? By morning, a hospital social worker named Diana sat beside my bed, gently explaining terms like elder financial abuse and exploitation by family members. The shame was overwhelming. I was a registered nurse who had reported suspected elder abuse during my career. How had I failed to recognize it in my own home? "This is more common than you think," Diana assured me, "especially with adult children who become involved with partners from wealthier backgrounds. There's pressure to appear financially successful." "I gave him everything I could," I whispered, tears sliding down my face. "I worked extra shifts. I went without. His education came before my retirement." Diana nodded sympathetically. "And that's exactly why you shouldn't blame yourself. You were a good mother. His choices are not your failure." But as I stared at the ceiling that morning, machines monitoring my damaged heart, I felt like the biggest failure in the world. My body was broken. My finances were compromised. The home I'd sacrificed to purchase was being sold without my consent. And my only child, the person I loved most in this world, was the architect of my destruction. When the doctor came to discuss my recovery plan, I could barely focus on his words. What recovery? What was left to recover for? The life I'd built was being dismantled while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. For the first time in my 56 years, I understood what it meant to hit rock bottom. What Adrian didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have anticipated, was the meeting I'd had with Thomas Jenkins 4 weeks earlier. The missing documents had alarmed me enough to take precautionary measures, though even then I couldn't have imagined the full extent of Adrian's betrayal. Thomas and I met in his downtown office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I brought every financial document I could find, along with my concerns about Adrian's increasing interest in my assets. I feel silly being suspicious of my own son, I admitted as Thomas reviewed the papers. But something doesn't feel right. Thomas, a grandfatherly man with kind eyes and a reputation for protecting vulnerable clients, didn't dismiss my concerns. Trust your instincts, Colleen. I've seen situations where even loving family relationships become complicated when money is involved. He examined my house deed carefully. This property is your most valuable asset. If you're concerned about potential pressure to sell, we should take steps to protect it. Over the next 2 hours, Thomas outlined a protective strategy that seemed excessive at the time, but would prove to be my salvation. First, he created an irrevocable trust with me, as both the grantor and beneficiary, with Judy named as successor trustee. Then we transferred legal ownership of my house to this trust. An irrevocable trust can't be altered or revoked without the beneficiary's consent, Thomas explained. Even with a power of attorney, Adrian couldn't sell property held in this trust. Next, we opened a new account at a different bank under the trust's name and transferred a significant portion of my savings into it. Keep enough in your regular accounts for normal expenses, Thomas advised, but protect the bulk of your assets through the trust. We also discussed the power of attorney documents that Adrian had been pressuring me to sign. Thomas drafted a limited power of attorney that would only take effect if I was medically declared incompetent, with specific exclusions preventing real estate transactions without court approval. But I never signed them, I reminded Thomas during our urgent phone call from the hospital. The papers disappeared from my filing cabinet, but I never signed anything. Then Adrian has no legal authority to sell your house, Thomas confirmed. And since the property is now owned by the trust, not by you personally, he couldn't sell it even with a legitimate power of attorney. As for the missing documents, if he's forged your signature, that's criminal fraud. There was more protection Adrian knew nothing about. 2 years earlier, I'd inherited a small cottage in coastal Maine from my Aunt Susan. The property needed extensive renovation, so I'd never mentioned it to Adrian, planning instead to surprise him once it was fixed up. The cottage had been transferred to the trust as well, providing me with a backup residence that Adrian couldn't touch. What about my bank accounts? I asked Thomas, remembering Judy's news about the emptied savings. We'll file a fraud report immediately, Thomas assured me. Since you never authorized those transfers, the bank should restore the funds. I'm also filing emergency injunctions to block any pending real estate transactions in your name. As Thomas outlined the legal counteroffensive, a strange sensation washed over me. After days of feeling powerless, I was fighting back. The elaborate safety net I'd created out of vague suspicion was now my lifeline. There's one more thing you should know, Thomas added before ending the call. If Adrian has attempted to sell your house fraudulently using forged documents, that's a felony offense. He could face criminal charges and significant jail time. The thought of my son in legal jeopardy should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a surprising calm. Actions have consequences, even for those we love. Perhaps especially for those we love. Do whatever is necessary, I told Thomas. I want my house and my life back. After hanging up, I closed my eyes, exhausted, but no longer defeated. Adrian thought he'd stripped me of everything, but he'd underestimated his mother. The lessons of resilience I'd learned as a single parent, stretching dollars and solving problems without help, had prepared me for this moment. I'd survived abandonment before. I would survive this betrayal too. The confrontation happened the next afternoon. I was sitting up in bed, reviewing documents Thomas had emailed, when Adrian and Natalie walked in. They carried no flowers, no get well card, just Natalie's designer handbag and Adrian's forced smile. Mom. Adrian nodded, assessing the medical equipment with clinical detachment rather than concern. You're looking better. Natalie hung back near the door, her expression suggesting the hospital environment might somehow contaminate her cashmere sweater. We can't stay long, she announced without greeting me. We have the final wedding preparations this evening. I studied my son's face, searching for traces of the boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets. He'd styled his hair differently, adopted a confident posture that bordered on arrogance, but his eyes gave him away, darting nervously around the room, avoiding direct contact with mine. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said evenly. "It must be exciting planning everything so quickly." Adrian's smile tightened. "Yes, well, sometimes things just fall into place. Speaking of which, I've arranged for a real estate agent to help pack up your essential items next week. The new owners want to take possession quickly." The audacity was breathtaking. Standing in his mother's hospital room, discussing the theft of her home as if it were a favor. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Thomas Jenkins entered, followed by Officer Sarah Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Division. The timing was perfect, exactly as we'd planned during our morning call. Adrian's face registered confusion, then alarm. "Who are these people, Mum? You should be resting, not having meetings." "Hello, Adrian." Thomas said, his tone professionally cool as he placed his briefcase on the side table. "I'm Thomas Jenkins, your mother's attorney, and this is Officer Rodriguez." The officer nodded. "Mr. Donovan, we need to discuss some concerning financial transactions and document filings that have occurred in the past 48 hours. Adrian's confusion morphed into defensive anger. "Whatever this is about, it can wait. My mother is recovering from surgery, and we're only here for a brief visit." "Unfortunately, it cannot wait," Thomas countered, opening his briefcase. "Not when it involves fraudulent attempts to sell property you don't own, unauthorized bank transfers, and potentially forged power of attorney documents." The color drained from Adrian's face. Beside him, Natalie's expression shifted from boredom to sharp attention. "Adrian," she questioned, her voice suddenly higher. "What is he talking about?" Thomas laid out the evidence methodically. The house wasn't in my name anymore, but held in an irrevocable trust. The power of attorney Adrian claimed I'd signed had never been executed. The bank transfers were being investigated as fraud, with security camera footage clearly showing Adrian at the branch during the transactions. "This is ridiculous," Adrian sputtered, but his confidence was crumbling visibly. "Mom and I discussed all this. She wanted me to handle her affairs while she recovers." "Is that why you failed to mention her hospitalization when filing the property transfer documents?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "Or why you claimed she was mentally incompetent in one filing, but perfectly capable of signing a property deed in another?" Natalie stepped away from Adrian, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. "You told me your mother had agreed to everything," she hissed. "You said she wanted to downsize." "The sale contracts have been invalidated," Thomas continued calmly. "The banks have frozen the transferred funds pending investigation, and Officer Rodriguez is here because these actions potentially constitute elder financial abuse fraud and grand theft." Adrian's face contorted between rage and panic. "Mom, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them you approved everything." For a moment I saw him clearly. Not as the betrayer, not as the little boy I'd raised, but as a frightened man who'd gambled everything on the assumption that his mother was powerless. In that moment, I felt neither hatred nor love, just a profound disappointment. "Adrian," I said quietly, "I never signed those documents. I never gave you permission to sell my home or empty my accounts. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. This is how you thank me," he shouted, desperation replacing calculation. "After everything I've done planning for your future, making sure you're taken care of, taking care of me." My voice remained calm, despite the monitor detecting my elevated heart rate. "By selling my home without my knowledge, by emptying accounts I needed for my medical care, by committing fraud in my name." Natalie's expression had transformed completely, horror and calculation replacing her usual condescension. "I had no idea about any of this," she announced, addressing her words to Officer Rodriguez rather than me. "We were planning to use his mother's house proceeds as a down payment on a property my parents found for us. I was told his mother had approved everything." Adrian turned to her, betrayal flashing in his eyes. "Natalie, what are you doing?" "Protecting myself," she replied coldly. "My father's a district attorney, Adrian. I'm not being implicated in financial fraud." With that, she grabbed her designer bag and headed for the door. "The wedding is off. Don't contact me again." The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mr. Donovan, we need you to come to the station to answer some questions. You're not under arrest at this time, but these allegations are extremely serious." As they led my shell-shocked son from the room, he turned back once. "Mom," he pleaded, his voice suddenly childlike. "Don't let them do this. I'm your son." The words that came next were the hardest I've ever spoken. "You stopped being my son the moment you decided to steal everything I worked for. Please don't contact me again until you're ready to make amends. And Adrian, I would never have left you homeless and penniless while lying in a hospital bed. Remember that." After they left, I closed my eyes, allowing tears to flow freely for the first time since this ordeal began. The victory felt hollow. I'd protected my assets, but lost my only child. The monitor beside me registered my grief in accelerated beeps and numbers, a clinical measurement of a broken heart. Recovery comes in many forms. Physical healing follows its own timeline measured in lab values and vital signs. My surgical incision gradually faded from angry red to pale pink. The shortness of breath improved with each supervised walk down the hospital corridor, but emotional healing that follows no medical chart or predicted timeline. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "The wedding's off. Natalie left. Just thought you should know." No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just information delivered with the same emotional detachment Adrian had shown in our last encounter. I didn't respond. Thomas advised against any communication while the legal proceedings continued. Adrian was facing potential criminal charges, though, as his mother, I had the option to influence the prosecutor's approach. After much reflection, I requested they focus on restitution rather than incarceration, not because Adrian deserved mercy, but because I needed to close this chapter without the weight of sending my son to prison. Upon discharge from the hospital, I couldn't face returning to the house with all its memories. Instead, I relocated to Aunt Susan's cottage in Maine. The property was small, but sat on a beautiful piece of land overlooking a rocky beach. The renovations weren't complete, but the essential systems worked, and the isolation felt comforting rather than lonely. My first week there, I did little besides sit on the porch swing, watching seagulls wheel above the water and breathing in the salty air. The doctor had prescribed cardiac rehabilitation and rest. My body was healing, but my spirit remained fractured. How does one recover from discovering that the person you sacrificed everything for saw you as nothing but a resource to exploit? The turning point came unexpectedly. While sorting through old boxes in the cottage attic, I found a dusty photo album from my childhood. Inside were pictures of my parents, particularly my father, who had been cold and demanding throughout my youth. Nothing was ever good enough for him. No achievement met his standards. Looking at his stern face in those faded photographs, I recognized the pattern I'd unconsciously perpetuated. I had spent decades trying to compensate for Adrian's absent father, overgiving to the point of self-depletion. In doing so, I'd raised a son who viewed love as transactional, who measured relationships by what could be gained. The revelation wasn't an excuse for his actions, but provided context that helped me begin processing my grief. 2 months into my Maine residence, I received an unexpected visitor. My sister Jackie, whom I hadn't spoken to in years due to a long-ago disagreement over our parents' care, showed up on my porch with a casserole and determined expression. "Judy told me everything," she said without preamble. "I'm staying for a week, no arguments." That week stretched into 2, then a month. We addressed our past conflicts, finding that time had softened both our perspectives. Jackie helped with the cottage renovations, accompanying me to cardiac rehabilitation appointments and ensuring I took my medications. Having her there eased the aching loneliness, reminding me that family connections existed beyond my relationship with Adrian. Gradually, I integrated into the small coastal community. I joined the local library board, drawing on organizational skills honed during my nursing career. I connected with a support group for parents estranged from adult children, finding solace in shared experiences and wisdom. Most significantly, I began volunteering with a senior advocacy organization that educated older adults about financial protection and recognizing exploitation. Turning my painful experience into prevention for others provided purpose when I needed it most. Adrian attempted contact several times as his legal troubles progressed. Text messages with superficial apologies, voicemails blaming Natalie's influence for his actions, a letter claiming he'd been trying to secure our future, but had gone about it the wrong way. Each communication revealed his continuing failure to truly understand the magnitude of his betrayal. I saved each message, but didn't respond. Thomas advised that any reconciliation should happen through counseling and with clear boundaries, not through manipulative attempts to minimize his actions. True remorse, Thomas said wisely, acknowledges the harm done without qualification or excuse. A year has passed since that hospital room confrontation. My health has stabilized with medication and lifestyle changes. The cottage renovations are complete, creating a cozy sanctuary that feels more like home than my Boston house ever did. I've sold the Boston property on my own terms and timing using the proceeds to secure my future and establish a small foundation supporting elder financial education. Jackie visits monthly, our rekindled relationship, one unexpected gift from this painful journey. Judy remains a steadfast friend, now planning her retirement to a neighboring coastal town. I've built a different life than the one I envisioned, smaller in some ways, but richer in authenticity and self-knowledge. As for Adrian, I've received word through mutual connections that he's in therapy, working through the issues that led to his betrayal. The criminal charges were reduced through a plea agreement that included restitution and community service. He's teaching financial literacy at a community center as part of his service hours, an ironic assignment given his actions. I don't know if reconciliation is possible between us. Trust once shattered doesn't easily reform into its original shape. But I've learned that family isn't defined by obligation or biology alone. Family comprises those who respect your boundaries, honor your dignity, and contribute positively to your well-being. The most profound lesson from this journey has been learning to trust my instincts. The quiet voice that warned me about Adrian's changing behavior saved me from complete financial devastation. We often know the truth before we're ready to acknowledge it, especially about those we love most deeply. I've also embraced the freedom that comes with starting over. At 57, I'm building a life aligned with my authentic needs rather than defined by caretaking roles. It's never too late to reclaim your story and write a different ending. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you, or found yourself starting over when you least expected it? The strongest communities are built when we share our stories, openly supporting each other through life's unexpected challenges. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, sharing your experience. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about resilience and rebuilding. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to create boundaries that protect your peace.